Hi, friends. It's Z. I'm the founder of Embody More Love. And that's a spiritual kinky dance community for personal and cultural liberation. And I'm very excited to be creating this YouTube channel, which invites us to open our hearts to ourselves, to each other, to the gift of being alive and the beauty of collective life. Is something that can be tender to feel that beauty in today's world with so many of the reflecting, that some lives are more important than others. That's happening in such a heightened way right now. And how can we come back to really feeling the beauty of collective life? How can we feel that, not just conceptually, but like feel that in our bodies? So I invite you to join me on this channel that I am reviving as I interview guests who inspire me, as well as share about the projects and the work that I'm up to, which includes visionary films and kink immersions and performance rituals that I have the honor of co-creating. And this is a homegrown community that I started in 1999. It's like wild to think of that. That's 25 years ago today. And rather than being sponsored by corporations or partnering with organizations that perpetuate systems of oppression, I get to be financially supported by the humans who are most directly nourished by my work. And that's you, perhaps. So, for those of you who are already Patreons, thank you so much. And for those of you who are not yet Patreons, I invite you to become a Patreon. And your ongoing financial support really means that I can be the courageous truth teller that I am. And to address taboo topics and to be so deeply heart centered around um, responding to the times that we are living in. So I invite you to join me at patreon.com/embody more love. Today, I'm going to be talking about coming home to our bodies and moving from collapse or trauma back into presence. And I'm going to be sharing about this because I'm in the middle of teaching play, play with power and gender through dance, which is a 3-month immersion. And we just had an epic second session this past weekend, and I'm coming off of that with so much gratitude and inspiration. It's been really rewarding. And there's so many things that are profound that happen in that community, in that culture building together that I want to share with a larger audience because some of y'all aren't in the larger Bay Area, or some of you all are not, it's not aligned for you to be in the room with us for whatever reason. So may this wisdom ripple out. Um, so, I want to take a moment to call in some of the larger energies to support me in whatever transmission comes through to share with you all today. And I'm doing this very transparently. Often I do it more internally, but I'm doing it transparently because I actually think it's really important. Um, I find that in Western culture, sometimes we try to jump into fixing a problem or learning a new thing. And my experience with the Dagara people of Burkina Faso and Sabanfu is like we start, and other indigenous cultures, but that's the one I'm closest to. We start with calling in these larger energies of support because it allows us to see things more clearly and to resource ourselves. And so, in this moment, if you'd like to join me in closing your eyes, I am first orienting to my own breath and rooting down through the midline of my body from the top of my head, through my sweet brain, my mouth, my throat, heart, belly, pelvis, letting that energy lengthen down and then widen out into the hip sockets and rooting down from the hip sockets through the thigh bones, knees, shins and calves, heel bones, soles of the feet, welcoming our whole bodies, our whole presence to root in our bodies in this moment. And then connecting down to the earth body. And I think of this as 3 roots, one from the pelvic floor and one from each foot. And these 3 roots being carried down by our next exhale, down through what we're sitting or standing on, down through the floor, down through the foundation of the space that we're in, all the way down to the earth energy, through the soil, through the water table, down to the center of the earth, and letting our roots wrap around the center of the earth, resting in something bigger than us. Knowing that we're here for a limited amount of time, it is an honor to be here. It is an honor to be in these bodies that are designed to heal and designed to love and designed to vision. And taking a moment to call in these larger energies of the trees, of the element of water, a spirit of nature, a spirit of community, the best, most attuned, empowering, generative ways that humans know how to create intimacy and community, calling on those energies to be with us here. And gently softening our eyes open, but still feeling the roots continuing down the midline all the way to the earth. So from this place, a big core of what we're doing in play is learning about presence. There's a big buzzword around consent, but consent is almost jumping ahead, because first we have to be present together. And if anyone is not fully present, it doesn't matter how thoroughly you negotiate something for consent, because often we might be actually in a pattern or a safety strategy. And even though we're still physically in the conversation, our energy may have dissociated or might be merging and fawning and all up in the other person, but not connected to our core, right? Our energy might be hiding and just enduring, where energy might be really big and aggressive because it's trying to be in control, because that's the only strategy for safety it understands is available in the moment. Or our energy might be very rigid, where we're just trying to follow the rules and do what's right. And those are the 5 patterns. Those are the 5 ways that we can leave presence: leaving, merging, enduring, aggressive, rigid. Just did them in my body, but they're all directions of attention that happen unconsciously when we want to feel safer. This comes from the work of Stephen Kessler, my energy teacher, Tini Dakini, and her energy teacher, Linda Sassara, and ultimately was influenced by Wilhelm Reich's energy character structure. So there's this beautiful long lineage. And what we're doing in play is actually finding the dance inside of it that helps us come to presence. And one of the things that has been so deeply rewarding to me is even after just one session of teaching presence skills and inviting people into a 15-minute daily practice of presence skills, we're already seeing so much shift. Like people are saying, hey, I'm not actually that interested in my screen addiction anymore. And speaking about like, oh, I'm realizing that this job may not be aligned because I can't feel my energy core in it. Or noticing like, hey, I'm actually have some no's around my things happening in my relationship that I hadn't been noticing, naming, and expressing in current time, right? So just after one session and us practicing this, we're starting to see this like deeper truth telling and coming into presence. And I feel like often I think people think of presence as something that happens just in the moment. But I would say that I can only be as present with you in this moment as I am in the baseline of my life. And that having daily practice is so important for returning to baseline, for nurturing our baseline to be inside of that, what they traditionally call window of tolerance, but tolerance isn't that helpful. I would say window of presence. So what I want to speak about today is this core channel in our body. And even the way we ground it at the beginning is one of the practices of it's the beginning of one of the practices of coming back home to our bodies. And, often people talk to me and they're like, well, I want to feel more connected in my lovemaking or my kink scenes or in my difficult fights, that are trying to repair. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. And if you are habitually not present for big areas of your life, it's going to affect your capacity to be present for the most important parts of our life, right? So one of the things we've been playing with is what we call in this energy lineage our core, and our core literally runs through the midline of the body. You can think of the body like a big tree and we root down into the earth, but we also have this like reaching up, like all the leaves of our being reaching up to drink in the sun, right? And this sense of our divine purpose. And that this channel, it's almost like you can think of it as like some people do dowsing, or like it's like a deep listening that's not just your conceptual brain, um, but more so this deep listening through the whole body. And the soul doesn't have words. So the soul is often communicating to us through sensations, which are like the rawest form. Even before we interpret them as emotions or thoughts, we have sensations. And when we start to leave feeling along this midline of the body, it's very hard for us to reach erotic ecstasy. It's hard for us to be able to grieve the things we need to grieve, to be able to stay present and truth tellers. Um, it's hard for us to tend to our relations in current time because there can be like a backlog of actually how we're integrating past experiences, right? So we're coming into, excuse me, this present time in the midline of the body. And one of the things I've been playing with is, um, I was told that most people who've done ballet or Pilates have a really strong core. And as someone who's done a lot of ballet and Pilates and taught those things in my life, I was like, huh, that's so interesting. What do I as the dancer, what do I as the Pilates teacher know about core that maybe isn't talked about so much when we learn about these energy practices? And so I started to think about, we have many different abdominal groups in our body. And there's something about working with the abdominals specifically that come the closest to our midline and building. a deep connection between our breath and our transverse abdominals that supports us to come into presence. And I want to share a little bit more deeply about that in this conversation with you all. Um, I've been fascinated that when I teach core and I include a physical practice, that there's such a wide variety of responses. But one of the things about core is if you tend to have a lot of depression or dissociation or collapse, um, core can really bring you back into your body. And it's kind of magical. Like it's like often when you're like, oh, I'm having suicidal ideation, and the last thing you're thinking is like, let me do some sit-ups, you know? It's like counterintuitive, and yet it actually helps us come back online. And I've been witnessing this as I've been teaching it with people, and even people who are having past trauma interfering with their current um, experience of their current present moment sensations in the midline of their body. So, what I want to share with you is just like a little simple practice and then talk about um, why it's working. So we've got our abdominals, and our abdominals, the most superficial layer is the rectus abdominal. That's where you would see the six pack, and that runs this way. And that's most superficial, meaning closest to the skin. And then we've got obliques. We've got internal and external obliques, which run on diagonals on these like crisscross fibers on the sides of the body. And then the deepest, meaning closest to the midline of the body, is the transverse abdominals. And those are very low and they wrap around. I like to think of them as like a friend that's coming up behind me to give me this deep, low hug. And the transverse abdominals also interdigitate with the pelvic floor muscles. And so they're really important in our vital energy, in our erotic energy, and in our health, like just our core supporting our vitality in our bodies. I have to tell you all that um, there's a dear elder in my life. I want to be very mindful of not outing anybody's identity as I speak. And so you'll notice me sometimes pause and like, how do I describe this person? But very dear elder in my life who's been struggling with having energy and kept saying to me, oh, I'm getting older. This must be what getting older is. And after years and years, they decided to go to a Pilates class and they're like, oh my God, Z, I cannot believe how much energy I have. This wasn't just natural aging. It was like, just doing this deep core work with breath work that has brought them back into life. And it's been incredible. It's been incredible to witness, right? So, okay. So here we go. We've got our transverse, and I want you to invite you to actually like play with this for a moment if you're interested. So just as a point of reference, let me bring you all closer to me. So as a point of reference, here's my belly button and here's my pubic bone. And my transverse, where I'm going to touch, is kind of in the middle. So it's pretty low. It's not up here by my navel, but it is above the pubic bone. And it's like maybe an inch and a half from the sides of my midline. And I'm going to feel in there for my transverse abdominals, right? And some people, you might be able to feel this more than other bodies, right? But you can actually feel it on a lot of bodies because even bigger bodies, the fat tends to happen higher up. So this is quite low. So as you feel for this, I want you to make a hiss sound, this very slow, long hiss. And as you do that, I want you to feel for your transverse where you're touching to actually start to move in towards the midline subtly and to move back into the front of the body. And you'll notice that sometimes when we try to get into our deep core, we actually like push out and just notice if that's happening and then kind of cue yourself back in. So as we hiss I'm feeling for my fingertips coming towards each other naturally because what they're touching, those fibers are coming in. And then I'm also feeling for a sinking towards the front of my spine as I hiss. I'm going to invite us to do this 2 more times. Narrowing, drawing back into the front of the spine, really deepening, full exhale, and feeling for the whole midline of my spine, from the top of my head to my pelvic floor, getting longer, right? Not shorter. And then we're going to do it 1 more time. And you might even imagine like a tube of toothpaste, and but only with a cap on both ends. And it's like I'm getting longer. So I'm not shortening through my strength. I'm getting longer. The top of my head is lifting up and my sits bones are reaching down as I hiss. And I like to think of it as like brightening the whole midline of the body, right? I'm not trying to get skinnier. I'm not trying to have less of me here. I'm actually brightening and getting denser through that midline core of the body. And as we do this, one of my favorite things, I'm going to show you all a really cool image. Um, One of my favorite things is, ta-da, this image comes from, you'll see up here, Ruby Jo Walker. Now, the basis of this map, I've seen many different people cover, but I particularly like um, Ruby Jo Walker's uh, simplification of it. So I just want to name that. So you'll see here that at the bottom is our sense of safety. And in this is where where we have capacity for intimacy. It's where we have capacity to be with that incredible gap of like what's true and what's the dream. And can I be present to both at the same time, feel the gap between them, and be motivated to move towards my dream, right? Some people are only present with what they want, but they can't be present with what's true. And that's not full presence. Some people are only present with how things are, but they can't be present for their vision for what would be a better way for them. And that's not fully present either. It's a partial presence, right? But when we're in this, like, okay, I feel I'm perceiving safety. This is the space of creativity and compassion. It's where sexy time happens. That's from an integrated, grounded kind of eros. And often when we get up here is fight or flight. And then if we continue to have this arousal, and it's not the fun kind of arousal, it's the arousal inside of the sympathetic nervous system, which I like to call the presence system. But essentially, we start to go up here, which is where we can have our patterns, right? Dissociation, shame, depression. So one of the ways we kind of thaw this freeze is to come back, and doing this hissing and engaging the core actually takes us out of the freeze. And we start to move into, and the interesting thing is we might actually start to feel more fear or anger, but it's not a bad thing. And some people think it is, and then they stay back up here and they're like, no, I just think I need more rest or more space from it. But they're actually just staying in the shutdown collapse. But the cool thing about this kind of deep breath and these deep, long exhales support the vagus nerve and the vagal tone to come back, moving back towards safety and the green. But they also kind of bring us online again where we can be present with what's true and our dreams, right? And our place in that journey, moving to our dreams. So, yeah, this is one of the things about core that's so incredible that can start to bring us back into this quality of presence and deep listening. Okay, I'm going to pause for now. There's so much more I would love to share in the right moment, but I hope that this can be inspiring and that you can take away this really simple practice of hissing and brightening up the whole midline of the core. And maybe you'll join us for some of our practices around the basics, is what they're called, the energy practices to move into presence. Big blessings to you all. And may we continue to bring our grounded hearts and clear visions to each other as we embody more love.